What's up, guys? Welcome back to Fish Hacks. Today's video is about quarantining, and I've done tons of videos about it, at least 50 videos out of my 270 on this channel that are about quarantine. It's got to be that many by now, and it seems like people are still not getting it. They're still not getting the basic fundamentals and really the overall picture of why quarantining is so important. And then you have people here on YouTube that are posting videos about buying fish at the local fish store, acclimating them, and dropping them in the reef tank. And I tend to not watch too many YouTube channels because, for one, it takes a lot of time out of my day, and I know that people want me to come see their stuff, and I do make an effort on my free time to check out, but 9 out of 10 times I just can't do it. And then, you know, the other day I had a chance to check out a few channels, and I just got irritated immediately. People are promoting not quarantining fish now, and it's alarming, and it's very bad for the hobby, and I'm going to talk about that here in this video. Alright, so let's go and get into this. What is the purpose of a quarantine system? Well, it is a saltwater system that is completely separate in all ways from your main display. That's including a different net, including different water change piping or tubing. Especially if you use copper, you don't want to use any of that with your main display because it will leach into the tank and kill your coral. Now, the second reason is to allow you to observe any kind of fish, invertebrates, and or coral for internal or external parasites, also for any kind of hitchhikers. Now, by having it separated from your main display allows you to catch these things, allows you to treat for them, and then observe even longer. And then once the issue has been taken care of, you can then go ahead and put that item into your main display without worrying about having any of that stuff happening in the main tank. So with just that little bit of information being said, isn't that enough for you to want to quarantine your fish, coral, and or invertebrates? Now, guaranteed, not everybody quarantines all three. I know in the beginning I didn't quarantine my coral or my invertebrates, and I just stuck with the fish. But as time goes on and you start investing more and more money into your system, you tend to want to quarantine, especially coral. Not so much invertebrates. I've never really had an issue with them, and I'll explain in a little while why I haven't. But specifically coral, especially when you have a full reef tank full of SPS, you definitely want to observe your coral a little bit closely at that point. And the best thing to do is just establish a habit early on. Quarantine your fish, your coral specifically in the beginning, and just continue to do that throughout your your life within this hobby. Alright, so with that being said, let's go ahead and focus on each one of those real quick. And the first one we're going to talk about is fish. A lot of people, including myself in the beginning, went to my local fish store, saw a cool looking saltwater fish, and was like, I gotta have it. I'm gonna go ahead and purchase it. It looks somewhat healthy. I kind of know what I'm looking for. It's not beat up or the fins aren't ripped off, and it's swimming, so it must be healthy, right? So then I go ahead and take it home, drip acclimate it or float the bag just like I thought I read on the internet, and then plop it in the tank and hope that everything will be okay. Now, the key word I want to talk about there is hope. And in this hobby, there is no room for that word. It should not exist. It shouldn't even be a part of it. And what hope will get you in this hobby is a dead reef tank, period. And with that being said, the fish might look okay for the first couple days, but more times than not, it ends up, being, I guess, a weak immune system over its travels, which I'll get to in a second, and then it just finally succumbs to an internal and external parasite. And then by the time you notice that there's an issue with the fish, it has already infested your entire tank. That's just kind of how that ends up happening. Now, regarding the travels that the fish has gone through, let me give you a quick overview of kind of what the fish goes through to get to you. Now, there is going to be some joker on the other side of the world with a license to catch fish. So they'll catch them in a net or via chemicals, put them in a bag, and then ship them to a centralized hub, which then will ship it to another hub. And during that time, the fish might be transported in and out of bags, in and out of different types of water, and in and out of different types of tanks with different types of fish, depending on that whole situation. This is a worst case scenario here. And then by the time that's done, it gets packed up, sent over to another hub here in the United States, in turn gets repackaged and sent to various stores. Now, depending on the size of the store will depend on if they can skip a couple of those steps because of the sheer amount of volume and fish that they get. But at the end of the day, the fish stores buy these fish at a reduced price. I mean reduced price, like 1/5, maybe 1/8 the price of the fish that you're paying for. And the reason for them getting it so cheap is because they expect the fish to die. Some fish stores expect at least half of their stock to die, either right there or on the way to there, and they kind of compensate for that by selling the fish to you at a ridiculous price, like a hippo tang I've seen at a local fish store, a baby one like 2 or 3 inches selling for $120 when they just bought that fish for like $12. And the reason is because there's a good chance that that fish is going to die. So they're going to sell that one to you, make that $112, and then be able to buy another 10 or 15 of them and hope that 5 or more of those will survive, and then they can go ahead and continue the process. That's what they do to make money. Now, very rarely have I ever seen a big box chain store quarantine their fish. I've never seen it. I heard of them putting chemicals in the water to help, but unless there's no chemical in the world that's going to fix everything. There are chemicals that are going to help with stress and help get some internal stuff done, but the reality is if your fish isn't quarantined for a certain period of time, 4 to 5 weeks or even longer, then it's not quarantining. A couple days means nothing. You seeing your fish look healthy in a tank for a week means nothing. All right. So with that being said, I feel like every fish that I successfully get through quarantine is like a little miracle in itself because of the sheer amount of obstacles and all the transitions that fish went through, and really all the effort that was taken and put into making that fish get through that quarantine process. Now, that doesn't mean that the fish is going to live forever in the main display. There has been several times that I've done this whole process. The fish was completely healthy, and then I put it in the main display, and my tangs decide to be a bunch of jerks and then beat up on that fish, and then eventually it didn't want to eat and it starved to death. That's happened a couple times, and in my quarantine videos, my tang videos, I go into how to transition into a tank with tangs, and there will be more videos in the future on all that process. Now, with that being said, quarantining isn't 100% foolproof. There isn't a guaranteed thing that you can do to make sure that nothing ever happens. There's nothing guaranteed in this hobby. There's nothing guaranteed in any aspect of life, but there are certain processes within that quarantine setup that will better your odds and chances of getting through and then having an ultimately healthy fish. All right, so enough about fish. Let's go ahead and move on to coral and invertebrates. Now, when it comes to coral, I really didn't start quarantining it until I ran into my first issue with red bugs. And red bugs come with acropora, and you can get most of them with your dip, but the eggs in general don't really get affected by the dip, and it really depends on what dip you're using. And I will do future videos all about that because if I went into all the detail, this video would be freaking 4 hours long. So in general, you can dip your coral and you'll still end up getting acropora eating red bugs. It happens. All right. Now, it really sucks because they only impact acropora, and the sheer amount of money that acropora costs just to see them being eaten alive. And if you don't catch it fast enough, it will eventually kill the coral. So with that being said, I experienced my first acropora eating red bug issue. I went to the vet, got the medication, which cost me about $150, something like that. And then I went ahead and treated the tank. And I did that for 3 weeks, cured the issue, and then said, oh, well, I'm never doing that again. I'm going to take further steps to make sure that I don't have any issues. Now, I set up that frag system, which was initially a quarantine system, and then turned into a system which I sold coral out of. It evolved over time. But in general, that system I originally started with was to specifically quarantine coral. It needed to be separated. It needed to be looked at just to make sure there was nothing going to pop up. Now, another thing that a lot of people see when they buy big rocks of zoanthids, and they don't see all the freaking critters in them. If you're buying a rock of zoanthids at like a shop and it's got 100 polyps on it and they're only charging you $40, $50, that's a bad sign. That means that was cultured in a place where there's a ton of freaking critters that you don't want in that. And I guarantee once you dip it, you will see everything. And better yet, you probably won't see everything. You'll see the majority of it, and then you'll really start seeing the shit when you put it in your main tank. So yeah, quarantine coral is definitely something you should be doing if you have the space, and that's a key word. Not everybody has the space to set up a separate system that can support growing acropora for a month or two to make sure there's nothing growing on it. That's a very difficult thing. That's like having 2 reef tanks completely separated, and being able to keep both of them stable is something not everybody can do. So what I recommend you do is, if you're not going to quarantine your coral, I recommend you do different types of dip, and then just observe the coral very, very, very closely over the next few weeks. Just make sure. I mean, if you can spot a red bug early, you can treat the tank early. If you can spot a a zoanthid like a nudibranch or something like that, you could pull that colony out, and hopefully it didn't get all over the place. But again, it's so difficult if you can't separate the two systems. So I say, if you have the money and the resources, have a separate system to quarantine your coral. If you don't have the ability to do that, buy smaller frags. I'm talking 2 or 3 polyps where you can see every nook and cranny of that frag. Buy very small frags of acropora so you can better observe it, just to lessen the chances of introducing something. If you get a bigger colony, there's more chances for shit to hide within that colony. So that's kind of where I'm at when it comes to quarantine coral, for those of you who are new to the hobby. And it's a very difficult thing to judge, because you can't just expect people to go out and buy an entire new system in order to quarantine coral. It's just not something that you really expect a new hobbyist to do. So this really all ties into the next aspect of quarantining invertebrates. Now, it is going to be easier because you don't need certain water parameters. You do need, obviously, good salinity, 1.025 or 1.026 or whatever you keep your tank at. And you know, you want to keep them in that and a good temperature, but you don't need to have calcium alkalinity to keep them all growing and healthy. You don't need certain flow, and you don't need light. So it is going to be easier to quarantine invertebrates. But that kind of sucks, because I've never ever had an issue with my invertebrates. Everything with a shell gets scrubbed down with a toothbrush after being drip acclimated before entering my tank. It's just something that I've always done. And like starfish and stuff like that, you can't really quarantine a starfish like the blue Linkus starfish. Yes, you can if you have a pretty good established tank for that starfish to be quarantined in, because it's going to starve to death. So it's almost impossible to really do that. Now, when it comes to people who supposedly got ick from their invertebrates, I kind of find that to be bullshit. I've never even heard of that. I've had people claim that they got it, but then you dig a little deeper and you find out they're not even quarantining their fish. So it sounds like a bunch of bullshit. Now, is it possible? Of course, anything's possible, right? And this is how I foresee you getting ick from an invertebrate. So when the ick goes through its life process, it's got a few stages that it goes through, and the one that will transition via the invertebrate will be like its shell stage. We'll just call it that. I forgot the name off the top of my head, but basically it's the one that's immune to chemicals and all sorts of stuff, and you really can't do anything to it. It's just like a shell that it lives in, and then eventually hatches and goes into the water, looks for a host, and continues the whole process. And I'll put the name up here if I can figure it out. And basically, I can see that getting stuck like on a snail or in a crevice of a snail, and then you put that snail into your tank, and then it's like, oh shit, now I can hatch, and then it hatches into the tank and eventually you know, infests your fish. That's the only way I can see it happening, and again, that's got to be a very, very, very small chance of it ever happening. And then, you know, you even lessen it when you clean the shell. So that's kind of where I'm at on that. So when it comes to overall quarantine your invertebrates, if you have the space, you can set up a 10-gallon tank, and it's not a starfish, by all means, set it in there, clean them, see what's going on, then put them in your tank. But most people aren't going to do that, but it is recommended. Now, yeah, so that's pretty much it when it comes to quarantining all 3 of those, and this is my personal opinion and what I've seen and what I've experienced throughout the hobby and with clients. So you can do whatever you want to do, but remember that quarantining everything before it touches your main display is the best way to go. Well, guys, that's about it for this video. I like to keep them between 10 to 15 minutes long because the retention rate and overall views of the video is much better, and Google likes that, and it helps promote the video. So if I keep talking past 15, 20, 25 minutes, people are like, I don't want to listen anymore, and then they click off, and that's not what I want. So with that being said, before I let you go, if you guys have noticed, I'm kind of transitioning over to who I am in real life, and some of you who know me outside of YouTube know that I am doing that. In the beginning, when I started the channel about a year and a half ago, I was more of a robot. It's kind of reading off my notes and kind of just being politically correct and being nice to everybody. And now that I've just kind of been beaten down by people and kind of just ridiculed about my opinions regardless of how nice I am to people, I've just kind of decided that I'm just going to be me, and that is if you like what I like, awesome. If you're going to take what I say and you're going to use it towards your system to better your system, awesome. If you hate me for whatever reason, for being a veteran or in the USA for whatever reason, or you don't like the way I talk or I stutter or I say and or a lot, either way, if you don't like that stuff, you can fuck off, and that's just kind of how I am. So again, if you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace.